All right, welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG podcast. My name's Hat.
And I'm Eric.
And today we are going to be talking about Final Fantasy 15 Season Pass 2 again. It seems like Square just announced that the game is actually, or these DLCs anyways, are going to be coming out all in 2019. So previously we thought 2018, but now it's being pushed back to 2019. And I'm also going to give a few thoughts on the Season Pass because I wasn't able to make it last week. And then also we have Chrono Trigger update. Patch number 1 is out and it's live. And I was able to check out from somebody else, kind of check it out a little bit and see what's going on with that. But we'll talk about what this means and if we think they should do anything else. Also, Xbox One. They announced they're going to be having several classic RPG re-releases this month on their store. So we have Jade Empire, Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, and Knights of the Old Republic 2 coming out this month. So that's pretty exciting. And then we also have a re-release collection of 15 classic Sega games coming to the Nintendo Switch over the summer. The only one that's really been confirmed right now is Phantasy Star at the moment, but there's a lot of speculation about what else might be on there and if the other Phantasy Star games will be on there as well. And then we have a lot of listener comments that we want to address or bring up. We actually have Wounded Stork, Leon, and Disa. They all give their thoughts on Final Fantasy and just DLC in general. And then Disa also asked about some more information on Dragon Quest. And then we have Shondell, who gives his thoughts on the Atari VCS. He was talking a little bit back and forth with Eric, but he actually had another thought that he wanted to bring up, and I just wanted to give my 2 cents on it too. So these are the topics that we're going to be covering this week. If you're watching us on YouTube, just make sure that you check us out on the audio-only version. You can listen to us on Spotify and a couple different places. Just check the description for the links. And without further delay, we're first going to talk about what we've been playing this week. So, Eric, what have you been playing this week?
It's going to be short and sweet. Same thing I played last week. Dragon Quest 9 and Breath of the Wild, and I'm on Master Mode. And I'm just transitioning between the two, whichever I feel like playing or whatever I feel like playing more right at the moment. But that's it for me. But what have you been playing?
Very cool. Well, I am a huge sucker for Steam sales.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And I have Witcher 3 on my PS4, but I've been wanting it on PC for a while, and I've been checking every now and again to see if Steam was going to have a sale. And I checked midway through this week, and they had Witcher 3 and like all the expansions, so Game of the Year edition, for $20, which was an insane deal to me. It's the cheapest I've ever seen it with all the expansions. Yeah, wow. So I picked that up, and then immediately Steam recommended that I could also get Witcher 1 and 2 director's cuts, so like everything involved with that, for $4 as a bundle. So I also bought that, and then Steam also suggested, hey, Sid Meier's Civilizations 5. You can get Civilizations 5 and like every piece of DLC, like it was like 16 or 17 like added on pieces of content for that game. Total value is like $380. Yeah, it was like 92% off. So I got it for $12. So what I'm trying to say is I got some crazy deals. So I was all over the place this week, but I put in a lot. I had some time this week. I put in a fair amount of time with Xenoblade Chronicles. I'm trying to get through that just so we can talk about it. And I'm at some kind of snowy mountain part. I feel like I'm about 40-ish hours in. And
there's more than one of those, I'm trying to think.
Yeah, well, it's after Prison Island.
You still got a little ways to go.
Yeah, I know. I was like, dude, I'm like 43 hours into the game. And I'm feeling like, okay, like this game has to start like getting to the home stretch. And then I looked at a walkthrough to kind of see where I'm at. And I'm past the halfway point, but I'm like maybe like 55 to 60% of the way through. And so, I'm going to try to, try to push through the rest of that game as quickly as possible. I think I've realized like some things that are going to make it a little more smooth of an experience for me, because I kept like getting stuck in the position where I couldn't beat a boss, and I would have to grind or just redo the boss like 8 times. It was driving me nuts. But I got into some of the gem crafting, which made things a lot easier. I actually did not realize certain aspects of the battle system that I now figured out, which is crazy this far into the game. But I'm starting to enjoy myself more. That whole lead up to the prison island part, that there's a part in there where I was just losing it. Like it was getting so frustrating for me. So
yeah, I think I know exactly what you're talking about. I won't spoil it either, but I had a very similar experience when I first went to Prison Island. There was a particular boss that just, like, I really had to reshuffle everything I usually do to get that fight won.
yeah, dude, I was just like, this feels impossible. But yeah, I made it through. It was funny after I beat that boss, like my game froze, and like because I'm playing on my computer, I'm emulating it just because I like save states and everything like that. And my computer froze, or the screen froze, and I was like, no, did I save? Oh my God. Because I had to do the boss like 7 times. But luckily I realized I bumped my mouse and it just automatically froze. But I was about to lose my mind. Because like, oh my God. But yeah, so I've been playing that, and I've been trying to mix in Witcher 3 a little bit. I'm playing that for about a half hour, an hour every night, just doing like one quest. And honestly, dude, playing it on the PC it's blowing my mind. I think I like PC gaming more than anything now, because I can play it at ultra settings, and like the combat is buttery smooth. Whereas on the PS4, it always felt kind of clunky to me the way he moved. I don't know, maybe they patched it or something on the PC, but it feels like a much smoother experience on the PC, and it's just, I don't know, I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah,
this time
I
too.
may have to check it myself on PC. Now, over time, like between when Witcher 3 first came out and now, is really vastly different. They pretty much revamped the entire like UI system for the most part.
Really?
Like in the menus and everything. And it's much smoother and everything's organized a lot better. It's not as great as it could be still, but it is still a lot better than it was when it first came out, because I love the hell out of Witcher 3. I got addicted to that game very quick and just wanted to do everything in it. The one thing I always did not like in the game, though, was the menu interface. It was so slow, it was so clunky, it felt like a chore to get through it. And they did make it better, but I still say that is the highest criticism I can give that game, which is a good thing besides that, because everything else about it is just absolutely wonderful. And I do want to check it out on PC because it's $20, but I do need to be careful, or Gabe is good. You know how Gabe is; he's merciless on your wallet.
Yeah, dude. Well, I had to log off Steam because I have a problem when they give me deals like that. I just can't pass up. I also saw Skyrim was $20, and I considered that, but that's not quite as good of a deal considering that game's been out for a long time. But yeah, I'm a sucker for those. I mean, I got the entire Mass Effect series for like $15, and I think I've played it for a total of like 4 hours. So, but anyways, yeah, like I said, like the whole experience on the PC, it's been a lot better for me. When I was playing on the PS4, I had similar experience to you. We went through that tutorial session, and then like I still was like getting confused, like how I was supposed to control stuff, and it took me a while to get situated. But this time through, maybe it's because I've already played it before, but everything feels just a lot more intuitive. So I've been really enjoying that. But yeah, other than that, let's go ahead and move into our first topic. We had Final Fantasy 15 Season Pass.
Oh, boy.
Season Pass 2. Eric, you talked about that last week. I wasn't able to make it. And I was going to give some of my thoughts on that, but I wasn't sure if we should retread similar ground again. But then I saw recently Square Enix updated the Season Pass 2 with release dates, and they have now said that all of the content is going to come out in 2019, whereas before everyone thought like half of it was going to come out in 2018, and then half of it was going to come out in 2019. But now they said all of it's coming out in 2019. Besides, I think Comrade's deal coming over the summer. I don't really care about that, so that's whatever. But so it seems like they're taking their time with it, which I guess is a good thing, right? That's what they should have done with this game, the base game. Even though it took them 10 years, I still felt it still felt rushed.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago that they gave out that survey. They're like, what episodes do you want to see happen? It's kind of interesting that Noctis is one of the most requested ones because he's got an episode now. But I would guess that it doesn't take less than a year to make. They have to take a lot of time to do that. I know I made a lot of comments about it last week, but overall, like I said, trying to not bring in my overall thoughts of 15 in it, and just to give context to the DLC itself, or try to just criticize the DLC itself. I think these are good choices overall. Each one of these characters have a potential interesting story to tell that I feel like can, actually be called DLC instead of something I keep telling myself this should have been in the main game. But that was the gist of overall what I said last week, commenting on it.
Yeah, initially when I saw that it was announced, we saw episode Arden. I was like, okay, I figured they were gonna do that, but everything else was we had our thoughts and we were pretty much on point with what we thought they were gonna do. Besides episode Noctis, we thought Aranea, we thought that would be good. I thought for sure Luna Freya. I'm still kind of disappointed that we didn't get we're not getting a King Regis or whatever, but it's this is about as good as it's gonna get. And I'm
upset about episode Jared not showing up either. We can't all have nice things,
Yeah, why don't we get episode Jared? Come on, that would be honestly, that game needs an episode Jared. But that's going to get me off on a tangent.
Yeah, maybe from Iris's perspective, maybe episode Iris, and maybe that transitions into a DLC with her being the Demon Slayer. But no, we're not getting that either.
Yeah. So, but the only thing that that makes me feel uncomfortable with this is. Okay, well, first off, what I like, let me start with that. Episode Arden, the conflict of the sage. It's saying the story portrays Arden and his past, and we go in towards his resentment towards Lucius and 2,000 years ago and all that stuff, right? That's all very cool. It looks like somehow they're going to tie episode Arden in with episode Aranea, right? They said that's going to be a side stories, and it's going to come out with episode Arden. So I'm assuming the tail end of episode Arden, he's going to run into Aranea when she's younger or whatever, and we're going to see the Star Scourge. Whatever. That's all great. I want to see that. That's the type of stuff, the content that I want in this game. Now, Luna Freya and Noctis, I feel really uncomfortable with, because if you look at the description, it says the story about Luna's fate, which not even death can free her from. Her battle to save the one she loves overturns the destiny dealt to the Lucian King. So this tells me they're going to change the ending of the game. Now, I want more screen time with Luna, but I don't want it to be some alternate universe.
Now, let me ask, do you think it's either the very ending where Noctis sacrifices himself, or do you think it's during the instance where he's trapped in the crystal for 10 years when she frees him?
So what I'm hoping they do, and if you haven't gotten to this point now, by the way, guys who are listening to this or watching us, sorry, these are Final Fantasy 15 spoilers. We probably shouldn't have started with this topic now I'm thinking about it, but it's too late, so we're doing it. But what I hope they do is while he's in the crystal, because that was 10 years of time, right? If while he's in the crystal, she can be in the crystal somehow too, maybe her spirit or whatever. And we can kind of see maybe something going on. Maybe they have to work together to do something. That would be very, very cool. And hopefully that kind of builds up to episode Noctis. But like I said, I'm not a big fan of this multiple ending crap. And I already saw for episode Noctis they said there will be a grand alternate finale.
Oh man.
Yeah, so like, and Tabata is kind of speculated it's going to be a happy ending. You can see some of the artwork with like Arden like at a picnic with all the Final Fantasy characters, and you know they're like all like laughing and stuff. It seems really weird. Maybe they freed Arden from his demons. I don't know. Regardless, this game doesn't need more endings. It needed more stuff in the main game.
And I thought it was ballsy that they kill off the main character at the end. You know, it's like it's like a good ending, but not a happy ending. And I think that's a very bold thing to do for Final Fantasy, because you know you had like Final Fantasy X, spoilers again, where Titus had to go back to the faith, and you know that was the reality of the situation. Then Yuna had to accept it, you know, saving the world. And I thought that was a very, you know, emotional turnout. And even 15's ending, I thought to myself, like, you know, despite how awfully executed it was, I still like the idea of how the ending was. I just wish how we got there was a lot better. But I thought that was a good way to end 15. It's just end the whole Lucian line and let people just like live without the, you know, the Astrals or the Scourge or anything like that. You know, a good ending, but not a happy ending type deal. But like, now I feel like they just want to go back all on that and just be like, here's an alternate ending. You can choose which one you want to be canon. And I mean, it just seems so fan servicey to me.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, I mean, if people like it, people like it. You know, it's whatever. But I mean, they're changing everything I liked about the game. I didn't like a lot about the game, but I liked the whole Ignis thing, and they changed that. They changed the ending. That's one of the things I liked about the game. They're changing that, and so I don't know. I really hope that these episodes with Lunafreya and Noctis, like it goes into actual events that occurred. And then maybe if they want to give us an option at the end to like kind of change the ending, then give us that option. That's fine. I just won't choose that. You know,
it's so out of the ordinary too, because no mainline Final Fantasy has been ever known to have a major alternate ending. So, I mean, this is really new territory for the series. And I mean, naturally I'll feel uncomfortable with that. But, you know, Final Fantasy's never really been structured like that, so I'm kind of wondering what makes them think, like, that's a really good idea. I mean, did they get a lot of feedback saying we want alternate endings, we want it to be more RPG-like? And, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm disappointed that they decided to do something like this, but, I mean, we'll see how it turns out and how people react to it.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, so... I mean, and it's all coming out in 2019 now, so, you know, we have some time to kind of speculate about this. So, I mean, the biggest thing, like I said, I'm looking forward to is episode Arden and Aranea. I think, especially Arden, that's actually what feels like it should be DLC for this game, telling his backstory. And, you know, hopefully, like I said, Lunafreya and Noctis, hopefully we get some core story content that, like, I just want more information about what happened during the course of the game. And I don't want it to all be some alternate universe, like something that didn't really happen, but, you know, we're going to put it there just to make like 20% of the fan base happy. So, yeah,
I'd like Luna to contribute a little more than simply, you know, summoning Leviathan. And that's really all she did in 15. And like, everything else we saw was like either off screen or she just, you know, was healing people on her travels. That's the only thing we saw Luna do in the game.
Yeah, well, she only healed people once, so
that we saw.
Yeah, so as far as we know, one trick pony. But
the Noctis one, I do wonder what that's going to be. It's like, well, we've been playing Noctis through the entire game. So I kind of wonder what DLC they make for him. It's like, well, he's in the crystal stasis or something more.
It has to be while he's in the crystal stasis. It has to be because, and I'm looking at it right now, at least the description. It says, parting ways with the Astrals, Noctis embarks upon his final battle in order to attain the ideal future for all his people. So it says parting ways with the Astrals. So I'm assuming that the DLC is not going to start off with him parting ways with the Astrals, which would be when he's coming out of the crystal, I think, right? So I would assume that like maybe that's the second half of it.
This sounds more like the alternate ending.
I hope not, dude. If episode Noctis is simply like, oh, here's this alternate future, and it's like 2 hours long, and it's got like Arden and Noctis high-fiving, it's I'll just watch it on YouTube.
Yeah. Or I mean, I guess there is a small transition between when he defeats Arden and when he's in the crystal stasis again with the other previous Lucian Kings. Maybe they'll dive into that a little more. And maybe there is some actual like final boss we may face, like that suggestion I made that like there should have been a final boss fight with all 4 characters. That should have been like how traditional Final Fantasy is. You have a big final boss you have to beat.
Yeah, well, and they added like a series of bosses in the Royal Edition that everyone apparently really liked. It's like the Lords of Yor or something like that. I don't know, but it's 4 bosses in a row before you get to the Ifrit and then Arden fight that apparently are really difficult that people really enjoy.
Are they mandatory?
I believe so.
Huh.
So and apparently one of the things too is it's real. From what I saw is even if you're like really high leveled, it's still really difficult because of different. Apparently the boss battle is just really well implemented. It requires you to be very strategic on how you win. But one thing they did add into it that I thought was kind of cool was these boss battles are actually really easy if you got all the weapons in the game, right? Because that was one of the biggest criticisms. The whole game is about collecting all these weapons, but then you don't have to collect all of them to beat the game. So they kind of added in, well, if you get all the weapons, you get this like bonus thing that like makes the boss battles like a lot easier. So it's kind of like pushing players to go get all the weapons, but you could still get through it without it. It's just you're gonna have to be really strategic, I guess.
Well, I'm glad they finally added bosses worth a damn.
Right? Yeah, because I never died once. But that's my thoughts. Did you have any other thoughts with that?
No, I'll try out everything when we get the super ultra complete royal, really frickin' royal edition. That'll come out in 2025. Then I'll be glad to go through all of it again and see how it is.
Yeah, and maybe we'll get a Final Fantasy VII remake demo.
Oh, don't push it, man.
on that disc in 2025.
You're asking too much of Square Enix there.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I'll talked all about that, but let's talk about more Square Enix related stuff with my favorite game, at least on Steam, getting its first patch. The patch is updating. I've kind of talked about it last week, but it's actually been implemented now. It's got they updated the UI to have the font more like the original game, and they have also redone the graphics. Well, not redone, more like they reverted back to the pixel style and not the smoothing effect that they used on that. So those are the 2 steps they've taken out of the many they said that's going to happen. And for when I saw it, the touchscreen interface is still there, but it does have more traditional font to make it feel like the original game. So this is a good positive step in the right direction so far, but there is still a couple things they need to do to make it the experience that people deserve, especially for $15. But I've already talked about it enough between last week and today. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so that was the biggest thing. I saw where they patched it, but they've actually fixed a fair amount of things that I'm surprised they did, and I will give them credit for actually taking some criticism and at least allowing players to have the option of having the original Super Nintendo graphics or the previous version. And I checked it out on there's lots of live streams of it with like the patch implemented, and I kind of watched like the first 45 minutes or so of it, on and off. just to see how it looked. And it does look a lot better. I actually thought about buying it now, but man, that user interface they at least changed it to where it doesn't have like a Visual Basic command prompt that pops up where you have to type in your name or whatever. It looks like now they actually have like a snazzy looking like deal for you to type in, to rename the characters if you want. But still, that UI, it just looks so ugly. And hopefully, they said they're working on it, and they'll come out with another patch. And I just hope that they do that. And if they do, I'll buy it, man, because I want to support them actually giving a crap with these with these ports. My only concern is you see on Steam, because they added these like quick changes. All of a sudden, Chrono Trigger is starting to get pretty good reviews on Steam, which is good. I don't want it to do bad, but I just want everybody to hold their breath and say, no. Let's hold on. Let's keep the pressure on Square, and let's get that user interface adjusted. Hopefully, after they do all this, maybe they'll realize, hey, if we just re-release the original version of Final Fantasy VI, we could make a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, I checked the mobile version, the iOS version on my iPad, and it doesn't look like they implemented the update on that yet. I think they probably focused on the Steam version first, and probably going to implement the mobile version. Probably sometime real soon. We'll probably see it really soon, but they probably focused on the Steam version first to get some of the negativity out of there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the biggest thing, because it was like the reviews like on the first day was mostly negative, so they definitely wanted to fix that. But I mean, honestly, like I said, like I'll check it out once if they fix that user interface, I'll spend $15. I'll buy it. That's money well spent. It's a great game. So I think they still should have a lot of many other features. I mean, I think it should be somewhat comparable to someone who is going to emulate it. So I would like to see or have the ability to really tweak the graphics to the way I want, and like the sound and everything like that. But I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm just happy we got this. So that's big news, dude. I'm happy they actually fixed it and quick. So very cool. Still
cross my fingers for our hopeful original FF6 graphics, because I would instantly play it on Steam if that did come out for it.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Like the fact that they're getting so much feedback about this, it has to have occurred to them that, that Final Fantasy VI port that we did, where it looks like it's like basically, like we said, Microsoft Paint graphics. People really don't like that.
Yeah, borderline Crayola Crown.
Yeah, I wonder what would happen if we just released the original. So I don't know. I'm hoping they like it. Maybe this is a small sign that like things are eventually going to start changing at Square around these games. I don't know.
What I really wonder is what made them think that. I would say both FF6 and Chrono Trigger are about almost equal level on really beautiful character sprites created. Yeah. And what I wonder is what made them think they needed to completely redo the FF6 sprites, but not the Chrono Trigger ones. Their mindset seems kind of inconsistent.
Well, no, I think I can see what they were thinking. They tried with the Final Fantasy VI ones, they were trying to appeal to a new audience, which is obvious, right? So that's why they updated it, or in their mind, they updated it. They tried to make it like this high resolution. And after seeing everyone get mad about the Final Fantasy VI graphics, they probably thought, okay, well, we'll leave the Chrono Trigger graphics in, but we'll just apply a bunch of filters to it to make it more appealing in whoever's eyes, right? And that made everyone mad. So I think eventually it's got to occur to them that, like, hey, if we just don't mess with it at all, people will like that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think there should be some middle ground here. I think they should make some kind of quality of life, or just make it a better experience if they can. Because re-releases always get hit with the criticism when it's basically a direct port, right? When they don't change anything. That was the biggest problem with the port to the PlayStation 1, right? Was that, well, they added these cutscenes, but everything else was a direct port. And because of that, it moved slow. You know?
Yeah, like when it translated over, because when in the SNES version, when you load your menu, it reads like the data off the cartridge, and it's naturally faster to read off a cartridge than it is a disc. So when it got emulated over to PS1 on a disc, it had to read off a disc and not a cartridge to pull up the menu, which is why it took much longer. And it was lazy on their end to not optimize that to make it work with the PS1, but that is mostly the reason why it had much longer, more dreaded load times, both for Chrono Trigger, FF4, FF5, and FF6 PlayStation 1 version. All suffered from this issue because they never took time to optimize loading times between the menus, which cartridges were instantly.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's room for them to make updates, like make sure it runs at a reasonable speed, make sure it's not lagging. Like, I think the general like place they need to look at is, does this game compare to the original at all? If it's not as good of an experience as the original, then they're not doing enough, right? So at the bare minimum, it should be as good as the original. Now, the Nintendo DS version of the game, it's excellent. Some of the added content in there, I've seen some people say it's not that good, but it's not that bad. But other than that, like it's a great version of the game. I mean, it gives you options to use the cutscenes or not use the added cutscenes. I mean, it's not like ugly looking. They didn't mess with the graphics a ton. It's just like they just put the game out there and let you play it. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know who's in charge of these ports, but we could probably find that out. But maybe it's the same culprit. I don't know.
DS version is the one I always recommend every time. It's got the most content in it, and it does that side quest people are referring to did give more context to the transition between Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty cool. They added that, and it doesn't interfere with the main story at all. It is a side story content with Magus.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is they didn't make the game. If somebody didn't enjoy that, it didn't ruin the game, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like they're doing with 15 where they're going back and they're like, oh, let's completely change the game because we think this would be better. Like, no, they left it alone and they just added some bonus content in there to kind of like wrap some things up with Chrono Cross and just, make it more of a smoother transition, which is fine. That's totally fine. And I think that this doesn't seem like this would be that difficult of a project to do. Just port the freaking game. So, and it boggles my mind that they can't even do that right. So, anyways, that's my thoughts with that. Did you have any other thoughts with that?
No, just to mention also, the Steam and mobile version do technically have the DS enhanced content in it. So if you don't feel like playing it portable and you're willing to wait for them to make more fixes to the game to make it feel more genuine, then yeah, the Steam version will likely inevitably be the ideal version to play as soon as they fix it and get to experience that new content if you're someone who's already played it. Sure. And don't want to play it portable if you're not a person that likes portable, and then it's worthwhile. Or even right now, if you're willing to look past the faults of it has right now, it's still worth the playthrough for that ending content. But that's my overall thoughts on that matter.
Cool. Yeah, I totally agree. And hopefully if they change this, you should check it out and support Square actually fixing their games correctly. So, all right, moving on to the next topic. We have Xbox One. They're getting several classic RPGs re-released on the system. So April of this month. So currently right now, you can play Jade Empire, and on the 17th you'll be able to play Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, and then also you'll be able to play Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, on April 26th. I believe I saw where they already have the original one on there, so that's cool. But regardless, that's pretty cool that they're doing that. And my biggest question is, given the fact that Xbox has largely been losing this generation on the console war, why have they not been doing this earlier? Because the biggest issue with me getting I don't have an Xbox One, and the reason I don't have an Xbox One is because there's very little for me to play on it. Like, that's just plain and simple. There's a handful of games that, like, if I really thought about it, but really, I'm not going to go buy an Xbox One or Xbox One X because there's not much there for me to play. Now, once you start saying, we have our back catalog and you can play all these other games, like, this is something they should have been doing a while ago. And I know they have been doing this slowly, but these are big games, dude.
Yeah, I have an Xbox One, but unfortunately, they don't release enough exclusives for me to play on it.
When's the last time you played it?
Looking at my library right now, and it was like that Recoded game that came out. Then eventually came. See, the biggest problem that Microsoft has with this right now is, in terms of Xbox itself, is that everything is available on PC.
Well, and that's the other thing. Yeah, because that's true, especially with this. Jade Empire, Morrowind, and KOTOR 2. You can get all those on PC right now. And I know that, that's not necessarily what you were saying, but even with their biggest release recently, Sea of Thieves, which has been flopping, but that you can get that on PC too, I believe. So it's, I know Microsoft owns Xbox, but they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot when they do that, now that I'm thinking about it.
And they released the Xbox One X lately, and it is a very nice console. The hardware is really good, but the hardware means nothing if you don't really have the games to back it up. I don't really know what's going on with their first-party development, but like any potential great games that they have coming out, like they had like Scalebound that was supposed to come, but that fell through. And I like Xbox. I like the system. I like the games they released for it. It's just we haven't been getting any, while Sony and Nintendo also left and right are just swinging punches with like new games coming out. Like we have God of War coming out in just next week, and that's just getting critical acclaim right now. And
yeah, it's been
where's
getting
Xbox in all this?
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day because I was watching some of these reviews for God of War 5. And man, this thing's like, places are giving it like 10 out of 10. Like, this is like an amazing experience. And I'm just like, looking at like Xbox, why? Like, what are you doing? Like why are you not coming out with even something exclusive? Like, that's, I don't know. They're really, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Literally, what are you doing? We don't know.
Well, even with Sea of Thieves, Xbox, like, Microsoft, they I think Rare developed Sea of Thieves, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And so Rare was like, apparently Rare told Microsoft that we're not done with this game. And Microsoft like pressured the crap out of them to have it come out, around this time because they wanted to announce it. And so they're like, okay, like, fine, we'll get a version that's not going to be like, it's not going to be super buggy or whatever, and we'll get it out. So they got it out, and then they figured, we'll just update it like over time, and like that totally backfired on them. That could have. There was a lot of hype for that game. They could have really knocked it out of the park, at least with that. I mean, that wouldn't have put them back on the map in the console war, but you do it one game at a time.
Microsoft should ask Square Enix how it was releasing a MMO out before it was ready. Ask them how that turned out.
Yeah. Well, that's it turned out way more expensive than it had to be.
Well, turned out well in the end, but they kind of had to put themselves in a nasty red mark for a good while. Yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, I've been shamelessly finding myself talking about the console war recently this week when I replied on a YouTube comment. And then I keep getting notifications of people responding, and every now and again I'll check on it. And there's still a lot of people out there that like Xbox, and they're really hoping this next generation they're going to come through with a new system that's really going to reign supreme. But I don't know. We'll see.
Maybe they'll find something to keep them up and going the next generation. Maybe Sony will be the one who screws up when the PS5 comes out. Maybe it'll be $600 or DRM.
Well, here's the thing, though. Like, okay, Sony killed it with the PS1. They killed it with the PS2. With the PS3, they came out, it was priced a little too high. And so, like, okay, that's that generation they started to lose. But the thing is, if you look at like the sales charts for the PS3, globally, the PlayStation 3 sold more consoles in every other area except North America, where Xbox killed it. So like globally, like in sales, the PS3 it's still sold like 1 million more copies. So like, dude, they've been killing it for 3 generations.
Yeah,
now the PS4 is killing it, so 4 generations. So I don't know. People are thinking like there was a leak recently. The PS5 is supposed to be like $600, like you were saying, and I don't know if that's true or not. But something tells me if Sony's going to come out with a $600 console, it's because they think people are going to buy it.
If it's $600, it better come with that VR headset.
Yeah, it better come with something. It better like vacuum my floor while I'm gone or something. Like
put a Kinect on top of that thing.
Come with some free coasters. I don't know.
Yeah, the biggest hurdle with the PS3 definitely, besides the price point, was it was just difficult to program. Like the way they had it built, it like enticed. Like, and on top of that, having poor sales, it enticed companies, even Japanese companies, to go to Microsoft for a couple of their JRPGs. And that's the most that Microsoft has ever seen in sales, is when games like Blue Dragon and Tales of Vesperia came out for Xbox only at the time. Yeah,
so I don't know. I think Sony's kind of learned its lesson, at least with that. I mean, you've seen that same problem before in the past. I know the Sega Saturn. I was watching a documentary on Sega Saturn, and it was amazing how much Sega just dropped the ball, because the Sega Saturn had a way worse problem than the PS3. It had like 2 different processors, I think I saw, to where it just made it like such a pain in the butt to make games for.
Yeah, to this day, you still can't emulate Saturn because of that. Like, not even Sega themselves can emulate the Saturn. It's that difficult.
Yeah. And what I was watching a documentary on it, and like there was a Sega like team in the West that said, hey, like, no, this before the Saturn came out, they're like, this is not a good idea. Let's not do this. Let's go. We have these contacts in this Silicon Valley where we can get this new chip that's coming out, and it's going to be way easier to program games for. And Sega said, no, we know what we're doing. And that same chip went to go power the Nintendo 64, right? Then Sony, before the Saturn came out, because they just had their separation with Nintendo, and they were pissed that Nintendo just basically dropped them and we're not doing the Sony PlayStation anymore. And they wanted blood. They went to Sega, their biggest competitor, and said, hey, we'll help you make a console. We want to help. Let's do a partnership. Here's our technology. Sega said, no, we know what we're doing. Sony made the PlayStation, right? Then with the Dreamcast, before the Dreamcast came out, Microsoft approached Sega and said, we want to get in the console market. We'll help you make a console. And Sega said no, and they came out with the Dreamcast. And Microsoft came out with an Xbox.
Oh, Microsoft did help them with the user interface and the software for it.
But apparently they were going to, I don't know. From what I was seeing, they were going to do a lot more than that. Regardless, they had so many chances, and they just goofed it up. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I think Sony's acting a little more smart. They knew they kind of goofed with the PS3, and they came back with the PS4 with a vengeance. So
yeah, a little bit of fun fact also on top of that: the Sega Saturn, they were actually legitimately fearful of the PlayStation coming out, with all the buzz and everything it was getting, and they actually announced, I think, roughly a week before release, that they were going to release the Sega Saturn, and everyone's like, wait, what? and like decided to try to save money. And so that was their attempt to get some sales in before Sony came in and took over. And for Dreamcast, actually, when that ended, they are actually trying to strike a deal with Microsoft to let Dreamcast be backwards compatible on Xbox. And even though that did fall through, it did still have the Sega still made a lot of games for Microsoft. So it didn't go completely flat with them, but that was actually a pretty cool little fun fact. That would have been neat to play Dreamcast games on the Xbox. It probably would have loaded better.
Yeah, dude. I never owned a Dreamcast. When it first came out, I really wanted one because I was seeing these commercials, and usually it's back when I was a kid. I think the video game commercials that impressed me the most were like football or like racing games because those always looked like incredible. So I remember watching commercials for this Sega Dreamcast, and I'm like, dude, this looks so much better than my PlayStation 1. And this was before the PS2 came out. So, but I saved up my money, and by the time I had enough, the PS2 was coming out. So I went that route.
Well,
and
Dreamcast was a good console, but the Sony was just too big for them to handle. Like they were trying to beat Sony to the punch again, but like their hardware, which was technically 128-bit also, was just outdated in comparison to the PS2, which had a DVD player on top of it. It was no competition.
Yeah, the other end of the spectrum here too is that Sony can outspend Sega like 1,000,000 to 1, like every time, because Sony has so many other things they're invested in. They have so much more money. Same thing with Microsoft. Microsoft has enough money to stay in the console market for a long time, even if it's not selling well. That doesn't mean they would, but they have a ton of money. And then, while Nintendo is not making like Nintendo TVs or anything, and they don't have an operating system, they've had all these mobile systems that have killed it, and they have all these their first party titles that are like really, really popular that sell really well. So,
yeah, even with the Wii U, like Nintendo could fail a console 5 more times and still be fine as a company. With it, they make that much money like off the 3DS and now the Switch, of all things, also. But, while we are talking about Sega, that they released information about where they're saying 15 classic Sega games are coming to the Switch over the summer.
Yeah, I saw that.
And Phantasy Star being the RPG of choice, the first Phantasy Star for Sega Master System.
Yeah, and I saw that it seems like at least RPG wise, that's the only one they've confirmed right now is Phantasy Star 1. And there's I know the Phantasy Star community is like really wanting to know if, especially Phantasy Star 4 is going to come out on the Switch, because sometimes these collections in the past, like these especially Phantasy Star collections, I know the Game Boy Advance one, I think it only had 1 through 3. And then we didn't get 4 on the re-release. We had to get it some other way. I think right now you can get Phantasy Star 4 on your phone, but it's got like all these like free to play like.
I don't think you can even get 4. I think only 2 is available on mobile devices.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to double check that.
It is exactly like you said. It's got all this free to play crap over it. And you can either purchase it and get rid of it all, or you can play for free and you have to deal with like the advertisements and stuff like that.
Yeah. So regardless, originally when I saw this, I was like, okay, why are people even speculating about this? It's entirely Phantasy Star 4 is, I think, the one that kind of transcended like outside of the community of Phantasy Star players, right? So that's kind of like from that series. That's Phantasy Star 4 is that one game that a lot of people have played. Maybe they haven't played 1, 2. And I know 3 kind of tried to simulate Final Fantasy a little bit, and people didn't really like that. So that one's kind of unpopular.
It is general. A black sheep one, but it's popular opinion amongst people that 4 is the best one.
Yeah, so it seemed to me like they would definitely put 4 on there. But when I look at the past, it seems like sometimes they like to release, it seems like they sometimes want to release 4 separately to make more money. I don't know what they'll do if it'll come out separately or not, Phantasy Star 4, but regardless, if people want Phantasy Star 4 on the Switch, I don't see why they would just release the first one and not the other ones on the Switch. Yeah,
it's funny. Phantasy Star 4, more often than not, when Sega releases like their yearly collection of the Sega Genesis games, which they do all the time, is they don't include Phantasy Star 4 for some reason. And I've never really took the time to look up and see why. I think I remember that they actually did add it to a collection for the 360 version, but you actually had to unlock it by playing something else, if I remember correctly, or something you had to do in the main menu to unlock it. Which I was like, you are just teasing me at this point.
Yeah, well, at this point, it's like, hey, Sega, I could play Phantasy Star 4 in maybe 2.5 minutes starting now. All I have to do is Google Phantasy Star 4 ROM, and I'm pretty sure I could be playing it here real quickly. So
I have the original copy, so take that, Sega.
Yeah, I mean, or you can go play the original copy if you own it. So I don't know why they wouldn't release it, but so now that I see they've in the past they've kind of held it close to their body for some reason and didn't want to release it. I'm a little more skeptical that it's going to actually come out on the Switch, but or at least in this collection. I could see if it doesn't come out in this collection over the summer, I feel like it's definitely going to show up in the store somehow or sometime.
Yeah, Phantasy Star 4 is really big one. I'm sure people would pay for that individually. There's something I actually really want them to port over, and I don't know why, for the love of me, why they never decide to do it, or even on a mobile version for that matter, mobile or Switch, is they made this beautiful remake of the first and second Phantasy Star games for PS2, and they were done really well. I mean, these were it's just night and day how much improvement and a whole graphical overhaul it had of the first 2 games. And I was telling myself,
did they add cutscenes and stuff into it, or? Yeah,
I mean, it had stuff like that, and they were still 2D games, but they had much more detailed scenes, and it was the script was redone so it doesn't feel limited, because it was limited dialogue that you can put in those type of games back in the day, but they're really well done, but they only released in Japan. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a golden opportunity for them to just bring these 2 over and reignite the Phantasy Star series. And if people like the first and second one, then they could potentially make a Phantasy Star 5, not having to make Phantasy Star Online 3 or anything, but
sure.
And they could actually release a legitimate Phantasy Star 5. And that would be really cool. And the one problem I do have with releasing Phantasy Star by itself individually is that it is a really old game. It is really outdated. It doesn't have the level of charm that Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest has. It's this is a type of game for more hardcore RPG players, retro RPG players. And the way it's designed, the way it looks graphically is very non-appealing to people.
Are you talking about Phantasy Star 4 or because
Phantasy Star 1?
Okay, I was going to say because Phantasy Star 4 seems like they updated it a lot, but I know from the reviews at the reception at the time was even Phantasy Star 4 people felt was a little out of date. But yeah, dude, if you go back and play Phantasy Star 1 and 2, it's really, I can't think of a better word than just kind of ugly.
Yeah, 4 stands up a lot better than the first 3 games. I can even argue that 2 has a level of charm to it, even though it's kind of outdated in itself also. But Phantasy Star 1 on Master System is it is a oldie. You have to be a fan of old school RPGs to be able to get into it. I don't see.
So we're talking Final Fantasy 1,
even behind Final Fantasy 1.
Oh wow.
Final Fantasy 1 you can get a grasp of, and because it does give you a general sense of direction. Phantasy Star is kind of vague like they do kind of tell you where you need to go, but like it's vague how you do it. It's like, I need to find Odin. And it's like, okay, how do I find Odin? It's like you're kind of on your own from that. You're kind of exploring, walking around. And that's a lot of things that casual players are not big fans of. Or like more modern day RPG players. So I don't know if this is going to be like part of a package or not, but that is stuff I don't see. Now, if they released the PS2 remake and translated it, that is what people would like to play.
Yeah, I don't see why they wouldn't do that. I mean, I did see when I was kind of looking it up, I didn't even know they had PS2 releases that actually came out in the United States.
It's Sega actually has
because I didn't even know about it till I Googled it recently, and I just figured naturally that it only came out in Japan for some reason. So
for some reason, Sega does not like doing good ideas. I mean, it's so simple to make ports of games that people are wanting. You could easily port Phantasy Star 4 and just make some slight alterations and enhancements, and people would eat it up like big time. Like the name itself is famous among like RPG communities. You'll see Phantasy Star mentioned in a lot of top 10 lists because it is actually a really good game. Something like finding a really good RPG was a rare sight on Sega Genesis. So something like that was really a treat for people who had that console. Yeah. And why Sega is not trying to bring these games back or even attempting, I know it's difficult. I just mentioned before that it's so ridiculously hard and to near impossible to emulate Sega Saturn games, but there are good Sega Saturn games on there. I mean, Sega Saturn wasn't like a system full of bad games. It was just a bad system. I mean, you still had like games like Panzer Dragoon, which is an excellent RPG that people want to see. I want to see them try to bring that back, even if it does require a lot of extra work, or even if they still have the files.
Well, they don't even have to. All they would have to do is come out with like a sequel or something. They don't, and just see how well it does, right? I'm sure it would get a lot of hype. And if that does well, then okay, like let's go back and try to like port this. If it's really difficult, maybe let's try to just remake it. Maybe that's the better option.
Well, there was Panzer Dragoon Orta for Xbox, but that went. Panzer Dragoon was an RPG. Panzer Dragoon Orta was an on-rail shooter.
Yeah, see, and like we got to avoid doing stuff like that. That's not a good idea.
It was a pretty decent game. It wasn't bad.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just it wasn't Panzer Dragoon.
I don't know. Maybe I just had PTSD from like being excited about Dirge of Cerberus. Like, oh, another Final Fantasy VII game, and then like, wait, what? Oh, it's a shooter. It's a shooter. But anyways.
Yeah. Overall, Sega has these old IPs. They should take advantage of it.
Yeah. Dude, I was playing because when I had to go out of town, that's why I wasn't here last week. And I was playing a little bit on my phone. I was playing Shining Force 2. I played that a lot when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I got it on like I think a Sega collection for the computer. It was really weird. I don't know where I picked it up. But yeah, I played the second one on my computer a lot. So I was playing that again on my phone recently, and I forgot. Like, it's a pretty good game, dude. So I mean, they got a lot of games that they could be doing a better job with. I know they're trying in some ways, but I can't remember the last time I actually got excited about a Sega game. So,
hopefully Sega will make a comeback eventually.
Yeah. But anyways, so that wraps that up. This summer, there's going to be 15 classic games coming out on a Sega Ages collection for the Nintendo Switch. And we know that Phantasy Star is going to be on there. Apparently the original, which according to Eric is really difficult to get into. So hopefully we can get 2 through 4 on there, and that would be a good start. So, but anyways, moving on. We have a couple of comments Some of these comments, we may have engaged with you a little bit on the comments under the YouTube videos, but we just wanted to make sure that we brought them up in the podcast. And some of them are pretty good ideas. So we're just going to go through these semi quickly. But first one is from, let me move this over on my screen here. Okay, so the first one's from Wounded Stork. I like that name. But he says, first off, he says, wow, I haven't been so shocked in a while. I searched FF on Spotify for podcasts. Decided to check out this one. I listened to the whole thing, and it was some great dialogue and very composed and structured well. Thank you. He says he was so shocked and confused why the sub count or view count was low when he looked this up on YouTube. I thought it would be in the millions for sure. One sub at a time, Wounded Stork.
Yeah, why aren't we at 1 million subs yet? Come on.
I know, it's just me. But anyways, he said he subbed. It was so good. He decided our podcast would be replacing all music for his commute to and from work until he's caught up. And he can't wait to check out more and would love to hear more on Final Fantasy 14, which I'm sure Eric would love to talk about. So we'll have to have some more 14 topics. I know recently they just announced another update with Final Fantasy 14, but we'll have to say that for next week.
Yeah, I'll be glad to talk about the 4.3 patch next week. We can add that to our topics.
Cool, for sure. But he did say his only comment, and he's talking about the Royal Edition here, was, let's see, is he is happy they charged for the additional content. I agree with you guys from a principle standpoint, but personally, I much more value the continued production of FF games to one of my favorite series of all times. I'm a little different than most of my game purchasing habits. I have 230 plus PS4 games. That's a lot. And basically just buy all DLC and everything, and haven't touched at least 70 of my games yet. I just think the possible benefit of Square Enix having more money is an important part to consider, as however it may seem, there's definitely a line that separates making another game or going under, whether it be due to shareholders' interest, alternate, more lucrative franchises, etc. I forget who, but I saw that someone from Square Enix said they faced bankruptcy with Final Fantasy XIV, the original, if they couldn't turn it around. So that line may be closer than we think. Would you rather have 2 to 3 fast food meals or the possibility of another masterpiece that you can replay time and time again and possibly share with your children someday, like I share with my boys now?
No, that's quite a read. I don't think anyone necessarily disagrees that they should add on content to a game. If they want to do that, then by all means, go ahead. I think the main thing that we argue with Final Fantasy 15 in particular all the time is that it did not feel like a complete experience after paying $60 for it. I feel like we had to pay $60 and then we had to keep paying more and more money to get the quote unquote complete experience from it, which even the developers themselves have admitted that a major fault of the game is that there are parts of the game that feel incomplete or not answered. And that's actually why they're going back and doing a lot of what they're doing right now is for that. And as someone that we mentioned before, that we're big fans of the Witcher series. And what they did is when we pay $60, we got a full game out of the Witcher 3 itself. And then later down the line, they made 2 amazingly awesome expansions with it, Heart of Stone and Blood and Wine. And I enjoyed going through these. These were additional experiences on top of a already complete experience of a game. I did not have to buy these 2. I bought these 2 because I enjoyed the original game so much that, and they made these expansions. I wanted to buy those expansions. I didn't feel like I had to. I wanted to. And Final Fantasy 15 makes you feel like you have to keep getting this stuff to make it feel like your already paid for $60 game was worth getting. This I have major gripes with, and with the Final Fantasy 14 deal, it did get them in the red, but other projects that they had would have likely gotten them back in the yellow. The idea to get Final Fantasy 14 back from getting a black mark to getting back into the green with that was that they, on a personal level, did not want to see the Final Fantasy series have a tarnished number on their main series lineup, because that would look really bad on their company. And that's what Naoki Yoshida was going on with them about. They're like, okay, either you can just shut down 14 or try to keep updating 1.0, or we can just do it all over again, make 2.0, make people forget about 1.0. And that's what they did, and they were actually better off for it, because Final Fantasy 14 and the arcade games they put in Japan put it right back in the green. And that's more of the context of that. But yeah, but overall, we want complete games with added on DLC in the future, not incomplete games with DLC that's needed to complete it.
Yeah, so it's not that, at least with us anyways, it's not that we're against the DLC, which you rightly point out, like, hey, like if they can do it, why not? It's just how they implemented it. And I don't know. Sometimes you hear a lot of these rumors and a lot of these stories about Square Enix and they're facing bankruptcy. And I'm at the point now where I'm not I'm not too certain how true that is, honestly, because I mean you hear the big old legend with Final Fantasy 1, right? This was going to be the Final Fantasy. This was going to be their last Hail Mary shot at making it in the business. The company was going under. And then Final Fantasy did so well that the company was able to stay in business and they're able to make more games. And then Final Fantasy VII, same deal. They spent so much money that if this game wasn't successful, they were all going out of business. And then Final Fantasy VII saved them. Final Fantasy X, it was delayed. You know, they were in the red. Shareholders were mad. They ended up not being able to buy Enix. They had to merge with them. But then Final Fantasy X ended up selling so well. And it saved the company. Like you hear this a lot. Again with Final Fantasy 14, the initial one, it did so poorly, like they were going to go out of business. But now 14 came back and killed it. And same thing again with 15. You hear, Final Fantasy is dead. Like they didn't think it was going to sell. They only thought it would sell 4 million copies. And Final Fantasy was dead if this one didn't sell well. And look at it. Final Fantasy 15 sold 6 million copies in a month. I mean, I don't know, like maybe if the company's having this many issues after 30 years, I don't know, maybe they need to address some of their business practices. But I can see what you're saying. If you really enjoy this franchise and they can improve the game, why not? So I'm kind of in the middle on it, but exactly like Eric said, it's not so much we're criticizing the fact that there's DLC or that you have to pay for it. It's just the way they implement it is the biggest issue.
I always believe that you are allowed to enjoy whatever you like. Even if other people do not agree with you on it, you're completely entitled to enjoy, buy what you like. If you absolutely loved 15, regardless of the criticism that we gave, definitely more power to you. You're more than entitled for it. I wouldn't ever tell anyone they're wrong for not liking I'm sorry. I would not tell them they're wrong for liking something. But if you want a discussion about it, that's the thoughts I'm going to give with it. And, people who want to discuss it are more than willing to have a conversation with me, and maybe we can find out more from each other, different perspectives, and maybe we can look at the game in a new light.
Yeah, so we always appreciate your comments, and thanks for listening, and we appreciate and look forward to any other future insight you can give. Wounded Stork.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's an awesome name. Then we have Leon. His opinions on your last week's podcast that I wasn't able to make it. He said, nice podcast. He acknowledged I wasn't there, but he still enjoyed it with just you, Eric. So
wait, you weren't there?
To that. Yeah, I wasn't there, man.
Oh, I thought you were just being really quiet.
Yeah, I had nothing to say last week. So if you could listen very closely, you can hear me breathing, but no, I'm just kidding. So anyways, let's see here. He says he believes DLC should be extra content. He's expanding on pre-established ideas, but not a substitute for not telling the main story. That's basically what we were saying. But he feels like Square Enix might recognize that perhaps side characters like Aranea should have had a greater role in the game. He also said he personally thinks they are missing out with Nyx, who he thinks deserves DLC more than Noctis. He says specifically, no one recognizes the sacrifice he did for that whiny prince to marry the girl. Obviously, he's kind of joking there, but
He kind of did get his own DLC with episode
Kingsglaive.
next with Kingsglaive. Yeah, if only they made that into a game.
Yeah, well, I agree with him. I always felt like Nyx should have been in the game somehow, because I kind of like Nyx more than some of the other members of the game, and I like a lot of the other members of the game. And I agree with him too that I think they kind of goofed with Aranea. That she should have been a greater role in the game, and they're slowly adding her in. So let's say he keeps going. He says he's currently playing Final Fantasy 12. He feels similarly about Rex the way he feels about Nyx. He says Vaughn's brother, and that Rex was more of a main character in the first 40 minutes of the game than Vaughn was through the whole game. So just like episode Nyx DLC, he also thinks episode Rex would be interesting. I don't know if they would actually go back and add episodes in. I'm actually kind of surprised they haven't done that with Final Fantasy X. Going back and doing like episode Ject or something. I'm sure that would sell a billion copies.
Just make full-on sequels with them. With even like the rumored Final Fantasy X-3 being a potential thing. Oh man, I hope not. But, I mean, I love Final Fantasy X, and I thought X-2 was all right. But X-2's good ending was horrifyingly bad.
Yeah. So... I mean, I don't know. I don't know if they could make a prequel with episode Rex, but for Final Fantasy 12, but I don't see them doing that. But obviously he's just kind of speculating here. He's not actually saying what he thinks they would do. He's just saying what he thinks would be cool. So, but yeah, Rex, I always thought Rex was a very interesting character. So I can agree with that. And then he said on episode Luna, he is not that interested in it because he didn't find Luna Freya to be that interesting of a character because we don't know anything about her in a meaningful way. Also, he didn't think her character arc in Final Fantasy 15 was that surprising. Basically, how she went out of the game. And in general, it fell flat. He would much prefer episode Iris, which, Eric, I think you're somewhat in agreement with that, right?
Yes and no. I would say more that Luna did not have the potential to be, or like the opportunity to be an interesting character. They really brushed her off to the side any chance we got. Iris was interesting in that, like, we never got to see how she was as a demon slayer. And when you call someone Iris a demon slayer, the first thing on your head is, let's go find her. Let's see what she looks like now. Let's see how much more badass she is. Because I remember her in the anime when she's like a little girl, like a 4 or 5-year-old girl, and then we meet her again as like a 15-year-old in the main game, and then like I want to see like an older, war-torn like Iris as a demon slayer who's like badass and just keeping the whole camp up together, or contributing to it. I mean, I wanted to see that. I wanted to see how this character progressed so much, and no, they never show it.
Yeah, so I like to look at this because I see this occasionally, and I agree that Luna was not used to the extent that she should have been, but I'm actually happy that we're getting DLC with her, because I like to think about like what could it have been, right? So I'm hoping that while her character arc was not that interesting, that maybe with this DLC it'll add some context to it to where it will be interesting. Whereas I could see what he's saying and that Iris was, to him, had more going on than Luna. So I can kind of see both ends of it, but that's the main point of contention I have with that. But he also says, lastly, episode Aranea, he is in the middle on it because Aranea felt more or less a retell of Beatrix from Final Fantasy IX, but he'll wait to see if they do anything interesting with that. That's interesting you brought up Beatrix because I never really thought about it, but she does kind of have that same vibe. Like she's kind of like a general in the opposing side's army.
Yeah, I mean, there's similarities. She's a very powerful warrior who's on the opposite side of you're fighting on, but eventually joins you after seeing the wrongdoings of who they were working for.
Yeah, so I can kind of see that, but that's a really cool character, and I'm glad they did that.
Aranea is my favorite character in that game. I really liked her. I wanted to see more of her.
And Beatrix is one of my favorite characters in Final Fantasy IX. So, I don't know. I think That's one of those things where they could do that again in Final Fantasy 16, and I think I would still enjoy that. Because Beatrix is just based off Celeste from Final Fantasy 6. I think that's rather obvious, right? So,
actually, I would more compare her to being the female version of Leo from FF6. They're both paladins. They use the same abilities.
I guess I'm looking at it more from a character model standpoint.
They're both generals in their respective armies.
Well, so is Celeste, right? She's a general.
Yeah. It's kind of like a combination of Celeste and Leo, in a way.
Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, they do this a lot in Final Fantasy. So, but that's some good points. I don't think we missed anything with that. So, Leon, my man, you always have some good insight and really appreciate it. So yeah, keep it coming. Then we had, I think you actually responded to, her name's pronounced Disa. But you were talking to her about Dragon Quest, but I'll just go ahead and read that part too, because she had another comment about 15. She says, first off, she asked, does Dragon Quest 9 stack up compared to other ones? I'm playing 6 right now, going through them with Puff Puff Hour podcast. If anyone doesn't know, that's a Dragon Quest podcast. And hoping to keep up. I have played, but not beaten 8 before also. And that's the first comment. And I just want to say, Puff Puff Hour podcast, I enjoy that podcast, and if you guys want to have us on, you should hit us up. We'll definitely come on there. Mm-hmm. I know Eric is a big hater on the Dragon Quest series. He actually finds them to be terrible RPGs, but
so terrible that I want to do nothing but talk about it for 2 hours.
Yeah, no, he likes them a lot, so we'd enjoy that. But I think you answered her because you were talking about last week that you have been playing Dragon Quest 9. And you said it's Dragon Quest 9. It's pretty comparable to the other ones, right?
Yeah, it's a really good game. It's not as narrative driven as Dragon Quest 8 before it was. It goes back more to the classic style of Dragon Quest play, but there is it still has a very nice story to it, something that's engaging that you want to keep up with as you're going with it. It's just that everyone in your main party are all blank slates, essentially. Except your main character, who still is a silent protagonist, but your other 3 characters are literal blank slates, similar to Dragon Quest 3, where you hire people from a tavern to join you on your journey. Or you can do the optional harder mode of the game, which is no one joins your party, and you go solo through the whole game. That's very difficult, but possible to do.
Yeah, so it's sounds like it's they tried to go back and kind of capture the spirit of some of like the really early games with a little bit more modern touch. So
yeah,
if it's go ahead.
But Dragon Quest 11 is going to go back more to the style of Dragon Quest 8.
Awesome, because Dragon Quest 8 is supposed to be the best one, right?
It's my favorite one. That 5 being an extremely close second.
I'm trying to put debatable, like controversial words in your mouth. It's enjoyable to do. Okay, very cool. So, and then she also said, also, I'm one of those who really enjoyed Final Fantasy 15, but I get why it's split in opinions. I wish the game was complete at launch, but maybe this is how it's going to be for games going forward. I have the pass. I think the EXP pass for Xenoblade 2. And I don't mind how that, or Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and I don't mind how that does it. It's complete in story, just adding some quests and some goodies, it seems. So I still haven't gotten Xenoblade Chronicles 2, just mostly because I've heard a lot of negative stuff about it, but I don't know anything about their past. I know some people have enjoyed it, but that's all I know. Do you know what she's talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. Xenoblade 2 is better than X, but still nowhere near as good as 1.
What about how they implemented DLC? Do you know anything about that?
DLC seems like separate side quest. Like, the game itself is complete without the DLC. The DLC really is additional content. So if there are people who really enjoyed Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which there are a lot of people who did, and they are right to do so. It's not a bad game. It has a pretty decent story to it. The game has a lot of frustrating elements to it that really made me put down the controller sometimes, like with its cumbersome map and different levels that the map is not telling you to get through, and it was just frustrating me to no end, to the point that I didn't want to play the game anymore. But for what it had, it's more anime definitely than the first game, but it definitely has its good strong moments. It has a great soundtrack. The battle system is okay, but you have to go through 7 out of 10 chapters in the game. They are still giving you tutorials. Like, even in like chapter 8 for something new, it's like the battle system was just too complex for its own good, and it did not need to be by any means.
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty mixed feelings on it, but I think what she was getting at, though, was that at least the DLC, the way they implemented the DLC in that game, she would have preferred if Final Fantasy 15 had done it more that route, where, like you said, it's bonus side quests. The main game is a complete game, and honestly, I think Disa, you hit a nail on the head there.
Absolutely did.
Yeah, that's how DLC needs to be implemented.
That's what I wanted them to do. I wanted them to make a complete game and then like make expansion stories that don't interfere with the main story, like Witcher 3 did. Like, they could take us to like a whole new island or something, and it's like you can choose yourself when you want to go to that part of the game, because it's a major side quest. It doesn't interfere with the main story. And they could have had like compelling side stories and just that. But no, that's not what they did. So yes, I absolutely agree with you that it should have been a complete game, and then they created expansion stories that are set around the main story. That would have been a very ideal route to go. And I would have like purchased each DLC easily on that structure.
Yeah, like the episode Gladiolus, everything about that DLC, besides the fact that Gladio just leaves the party abruptly, if that would have never happened, if they could have like redone that somehow, with the reason why he left the party, maybe the whole party could have gone with him and they just sat outside while he went in alone or something. I don't know. But that whole story purpose for that DLC would have been perfect DLC. It's like some side event. It doesn't really affect the story. I mean, Gladio just goes in there and he like fights Gilgamesh. Like, that's not really, it doesn't really give anything to the story. You kind of learn more about Core. Like, that would have been perfect DLC, but yeah, exactly. So then we have Shondell. He was talking about the Atari box, or they have now named it the Atari VCS, which is supposed to be a nickname named after one of their old systems. So this is the new console that's coming out, and he was just commenting on that podcast episode. And I know you were talking with him a little bit, but I'll just go through this. He said he already has a PS4, a Nintendo Switch, and a 3DS, which was $250, and the Switch was also $300 too. And he doesn't mind that the Atari VCS price. He's really looking forward to this new console. He says he's going to give it a chance, to be honest, because he really loves the Atari. And he acknowledges that we might not agree with it, and that's cool. And I totally agree with that also. And we were just saying, hey, you brought up a good point. A lot of people spend all this money on all these other systems, so maybe the Atari the Atari reboot would be successful. But he also goes on to say he also wants Sega to make a comeback with the Dreamcast 2 as well. And he also, what does he say as well? I know, as all of us Sega fans do, both Atari and Sega are my favorite video game company. And the movie Blade Runner 2049, they predicted the Atari is coming back to the gaming market. That was actually I actually didn't know that, but apparently the Blade Runner 2049 movie, the Atari is really popular again. It's in the movie world, so that's pretty cool.
I'm not sure about that.
I don't know. Apparently it makes an appearance in the movie. I don't know.
Yeah, and people were also saying that there's some buzz after the Ready Player One movie came out, but
they have the Atari in it.
I think that is going to be short-lived.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think people will forget about the time the new Atari, what's it called, VCS box comes out, and you're always welcome to spend what money you want on anything you want. What I'm questioning is, since you have a PS4 and the Switch and the PC that plays indie games, well, I'm asking again, what exactly do you get from the Atari console right now that you simply cannot get on other systems? Because if you want to bring up the argument of their old Atari games, you can get that anywhere. I mentioned before, you can buy like this little $30 cheap plastic thing at like Walmart or GameStop, like on their front counter or something, and it has like almost all the big titles that they had on there. So you can educate me on this, because obviously you've probably done a lot more research on it than I have. If you could give in the comments what exactly the Atari VCS does significant that the other consoles can't do, I would be glad to revise my opinion on it and base the opinion off that information. But right now, I just don't see anything that it does that the other consoles that you own right now do. But if there is, please educate me.
Yeah, and he's just saying like, hey, like this is his opinion. He's kind of excited for it, but he recognizes that not everyone's excited for it, and that's totally cool. Like I totally get that. And I think it's cool that some people are excited for it. I did look up some more about the Atari. I keep wanting to call it the Atari box because that's what it was nicknamed. But the Atari VCS, I have to get used to saying that.
I'm going to keep calling it the box.
Yeah, it has a little ring to it. But anyways, the Atari VCS box. I like that. I saw an interview with the CEO of Atari, and he was talking more about the Atari VCS. And basically the interviewer was kind of coming at him like from our line of speaking, like, hey, like what's the deal with this, man? Like people are expecting this, its price point is like $250 or $300. I can't remember how much it was now, but regardless, that price point puts it in the PS4 and Xbox range. So are you trying to compete with those consoles? You're saying it's going to be able to play high-end games, and like your controller looks like an Xbox controller. Are you trying to compete with these systems? What's the deal? And the CEO said, well, I feel like it's more of a living room PC than it is a console. So the interviewer said, okay, so would it be closer or more accurate to say that the Atari VCS is closer to a Steam machine than a console? And the CEO said, well, yeah, I would compare it more closely to a Steam machine than a console, but a Steam machine's a little too ambitious for us, and that's all there was to that interview. So that's a little perplexing to me still, because I mean, I guess $250 is cheaper than a Steam machine, which is like anywhere from like $500 to $1,000 or $500 to $1,000, depending on what you get. But I mean,
this is a low spec Steam machine.
Yeah. So, I mean, it can run the Linux. It can run Linux, I guess, which is kind of cool. And it's going to be, I can kind of see what they're trying to do here. They said, hey, they want it to be easy to use. So they said like, so the general market can use it. So people can get Netflix and stuff on it, but also they can have the option to game. And, because it has this Linux base on it, developers can develop all sorts of stuff for it. And it's going to be a Linux entertainment, or not Linux, an Atari VCS entertainment console for your living room. I don't know. Like I said, like that sounds cool, but I just think it's priced too high for me to watch Netflix on it. And it doesn't seem like it does anything the best, right? Like that's for you to succeed in a market. And this is just my opinion, but for you to succeed in a market, you have to do one thing that's better than everyone else. Right.
Yeah. The Switch isn't the highest spec console by any means, but what they bring to the table is the ability to go portable and its amazing first party titles and a strong support from the indie community also. So it goes back to saying again, what does Atari give that all these other consoles and PCs that are already in people's homes right now and arguably more powerful, like, what does the Atari VCS do?
Yeah. So, and that's the big thing we're waiting for. I know Shondell does say later, he says that he heard that at E3 this year, they're going to give us some more information on it. So he's going to hold judgment until he hears more information, which is totally a fair point. Maybe we're judging this thing a little too early, but
yeah,
I don't know. I feel really confident.
I'll talk about this again
early.
after E3. I'll see what they offer to the table.
VR Pong?
Yeah, I'll play VR Pong. Why not?
Instead of a ping pong table?
VR Space Invaders, VR Galaga, VR ET.
Yeah.
Where I just get stuck in a pit and I can't get out, and that's the game.
Yeah. I don't know. I think VR Pong, that might be, that I could get down on that, dude. That would actually be a great idea.
Don't they have something like that already on PS4 or Oculus Rift?
VR Pong? I don't know.
Probably.
I mean,
it seems like something, it'd be like something very basic to at least test out with.
Like tennis? Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Without you having to run all over the place. That'd be fantastic. But, all right. So that wraps up this week's episodes of for our podcast. And thanks all for checking this out. And again, if you are watching this now at this point and you have not subscribed, we'd really appreciate you subscribe. And also, please check out our audio version. There will be a link in the description. And if you're listening to the audio only version, you can check us out on YouTube, and there will be a link in the description. But other than that, we will check you out again next week.
All right.
Take it easy, guys.
Take care.